I don't have anything new to report. Any of you know anything?
Bonding bills on the House floor.
Yes. So I'm available for questions.
So we hear a tax target is close. Are you aware of that closeness, and are you in support?
I'm not going to comment on something I don't know the specifics. I've heard numbers of 250 and 400 and 250 or 300 and 450. I've heard a couple of different rumors. I don't have anything definitive at this point.
Are they keeping you in the loop this year?
Yeah. Commissioner Bowery's been closely working with Chairman Davids and Chairman Scoy, and they've been very forthcoming. I just heard they were still hadn't nailed it finally down, but that's my understanding as of 10 minutes ago, so that's probably outdated.
Governor, the House is debating, if they haven't voted already, on the bonding bill. They're going to defeat it. Not enough Democratic votes. What does that mean? And is that a hopeful sign? What is that?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what that means procedurally. I believe they have another vehicle to go to conference committee. Yeah, but it means that the DFL members of the in the House whose support is necessary to pass a bill, both the bills in the House and Senate have to be bipartisan, I think is too low, and I would agree with them. I think first it was 600 million, now it's 800 million. It's just short changes, the kind of investments we need for the future of Minnesota. And it's, higher education, they're leaving out the University of Minnesota's health sciences project, here in Minneapolis we're working hard to build up the medical school, which is crucial as a corollary to what they're doing in Rochester with Mayo, to build a preeminent medical technology corridor for the benefit of health care for all Minnesotans, but also in terms of one of the cornerstones of our future economic growth. So they're just really short-sighted in their limitation.
So in an odd way, is this a signal that maybe things will move forward from here because they're defeating it right away today?
I can't say. I don't know. I hope they'll go to conference committee on a bonding bill, and I hope they'll agree to something closer to what the Senate and I put forward. It's a responsible bill. It's fiscally responsible. And again, if you look, I saw the Chairman Torkelson said that he'd received over $5 billion of requests. So 800 million is short shrift of that. And if you look at the projects, it's important to look at the projects that are not being funded in their bill. Just projects that are vitally important all over the state of Minnesota.
Governor, at this stage of negotiations over bonding specifically, what do you think is a reasonable number?
I'm going to see how the conference committee, but of course I think my proposal, 1.4 billion, is eminently reasonable, eminently affordable, and absolutely necessary.
Governor, of the $900 million surplus forecast for fiscal 17, do you have in mind a figure for how far you will go with regard to ongoing recurring spending beyond which you would not move?
I told the conferees, or I should say, I've told the leaders, all four caucuses, that we should set aside the $500 million that's in my budget proposal for the transportation. If that is not agreed upon, if there's not a transportation bill, that money should be carried forward into the next biennium, and that we should leave $200 million minimally on the bottom line at the end of fiscal 19, so at the end of the next biennium.
So you would allow then $500 million in the fiscal 17 for ongoing spending?
Well, I'm combining the 3 years. I'm most concerned about what is left at the end of the next biennium. So, in terms of one-time spending this session versus ongoing, I'm going to look at that, but I haven't specified how much of that 200 million, say, has to be set, not occur in the next biennium. But I'm saying at the end of the next biennium, the end of the next 3 years, fiscal years, we need $200 million as a minimum amount remaining on the bottom line at this stage with the forecast. We're going to have 2 more forecasts before next year's legislative session, but this is where we'd be now. And then if there's not a transportation bill, I hope there will be, that $500 million would also carry forward into the bottom line.
Governor, are there areas in the negotiations where the administration and other legislative leaders have reached any agreements? At this point, it sounds like they might be close on a tax target. Transportation, as far as I can tell, is stalled, but, I mean, are there any areas where there is progress being made?
I'm not, I mean, I think there's been progress. I think the tax conferees, at least in their discussions, have made progress. The supplemental budget, I haven't seen the resolution on that. I know there are a couple of sticking points on that. The bonding bill, again, if it goes in the conference committee, I'm hopeful they'll come up with something in between. That, again, it's going to need bipartisan support in both the House and Senate in order to pass. So it's going to have to meet a test of sufficiency in the view of House DFLers and a test of insufficiency in the view of some Senate Republicans. But, you know, that's what compromise is. You agree to things you don't agree with.
Governor, Speaker Dow told some of us yesterday that you provided them a list of things you wouldn't accept in terms of in the budget bill, I think policy things. Can you share what types of items will prompt you to reject a budget out of hand?
Well, you know, there are a number of them, but if they want to make that list public, I'd rather look at the bills that are and see what's not there and comment on what was there before. But there are a number of policy items that I don't think belong, it's particularly in a supplemental budget bill. Such as the ones that I mentioned yesterday.
So you gave them a list, but you're not willing to share it with the public?
I'm not going to get into detail. Let's see what they come forward with. Let me see what comes forward if there is a conference report on the supplemental, and if there are items that I still find problematic there, I'll comment at that time.
The Real ID Conference Committee is supposed to meet today. There are two major differences among some other differences as well. One has to do with immigrant driver's license and a ban on that in the House bill, and the other is the timing of implementing Real ID in Minnesota. Do you have feelings about that? Has your department weighed in on that?
Well, I'd prefer to see a two-tier system without language restricting the use of the second tier. I thought there were a number of those, really both sides of the aisle, both House and Senate, who wanted the option for people who don't want to go through the verification procedures for a Real ID license. I'm not aware of the timing difference. What is the timing difference?
The House would have October of this year start issuing. Your department has said that would be difficult. And
right.
The Senate has it in 2018, which would require some Minnesotans to get 2 licenses within the expiration period.
Well, we'll do our utmost to meet whatever deadline is set by the legislature, but October of 17, given the amount of time it's going to take, we still have to clear with the Federal Department of Homeland Security what they accept. They turned down our request for an extension, so they have sent a clear message that they have criteria that we're going to have to meet. So I would prefer we have enough time. We can do it right. I would be sorry to inconvenience anybody who has to go through a second license procurement, but it's important that we do this, we do it right, and it's important we do it in a way that satisfies the federal government so we can clear this up permanently for all Minnesotans.
And on immigrant driver's license, you had not been a supporter. Are you now a supporter? And could you imagine your administration doing immigrant driver's license administratively rather than through the legislature?
We don't have the authority to do it administratively. We've been through that with other interested parties, and we've asked, we're very clear that I do not have the authority. And especially if the legislature either declines to permit it or prohibits it. Obviously, if they prohibit it, it wouldn't be. But our position is that it requires legislation, at least legislation that's permissive.
Governor, on NPR this morning, you expressed some concern about body camera legislation. If the bill that comes out of conference looks like the 2 bills look right now, would you veto it?
I'm not going to say that about anything at this point. I think it's premature. What I've said to a number of the legislators, we communicated to Senator Latz, Senator Champion, and others that I think this needs to go back and be reworked with the people who were participating before. And in what I can't say it was a consensus or an agreement, but there was a collaborative effort to bring a law enforcement stakeholders as well as the people in the community who are concerned about it, and have something that could be accommodating to those different concerns. And then there were amendments added on the Senate floor. It was the House floor also, or just the Senate?
Senate.
That the community groups opposed and they were not given a prior opportunity to comment on. I think that's very unfortunate given how sensitive this issue is to so many people, to have something that was inserted on the Senate floor that hadn't been considered in committee. I think was destructive to the effort to find an agreement that that everybody can live with.
What is it in particular that you would like them to go back and rework in order to kind of gain your approval?
Well, I think, again, this is better left to the conferees to try to work out.
The Mesabi Academy, which your Department of Human Services pulled some children away from recently because of concerns over mistreatment, says it will close its program as of June. Did you have any influence over that decision, or did you contact them about continuing their operation up there?
I did not contact them directly, no. I did not, I'm aware of what the Department of Human Services has done. I think the initiative was taken first by Ramsey County and then by Hennepin County. And subsequently, the Department of Human Services looked into the matter as well. If that's their decision that kids who are there are not being properly cared for or are not safe there, then that's the right decision.
Anything else?
Governor, we're 82 hours away from the end of session. On your optimism scale, 1 to 10?
That sounds.
That's what Thiessen
yeah.
just said on the floor, so.
Okay, well done.
So I trust him, yeah.
Yeah.
What optimism level, 1 to 10?
I think with 82 hours to go, it can go either way. They're obviously at a point now where they need to, if they're going to get these resolved, give the reviser time to revise things and get done by midnight on Sunday. They have to get them resolved, or they won't be. I can't predict that outcome.
And if this doesn't get completed, these major bills passed and signed, what does that say about this legislature? And
Well, I'll save my postmortems for next Tuesday.
you said yesterday that Minnesotans would have a definite opinion about divided government in this state.
Well, I think this is a test whether divided government can work for the people of Minnesota, especially in the area of like transportation, where I've said for 2 years now we absolutely have to have a bill that's going to provide the funding so that we can improve the quality of our existing highway system, as well as expand and improve it, which is what everybody is looking for. Representative Kelly told me that he had 96 bills in his committee over the last two sessions from individual legislators who have their particular project in their particular district that they wanted to have funded. And they're probably right. Those are probably on the list that Commissioner Zelli's been taking with him around the state to show people what they'll get for this additional transportation money. It's both maintaining the existing highway system, roads and bridges, as well as making these improvements that I'll bet are in most of them in that those 96 bills. Similarly with Metro Transit. I mean, we're going to have, what's the number, how many more people in the next 25 years? 750,000 more people are going to be living in the metropolitan area in 2040. And we're going to force all of them onto the highways. I mean, it's just, the problem with the transportation is what we're doing is not going to be realized in terms of completed projects for, a number of years. But from that point on, they're either going to have been completed and everybody will benefit from that, or they won't and everybody will suffer that consequence. Whereas so many of those now who are up in next November are looking at how does this look on campaign literature for next November. And that's extremely unfortunate. It makes it extremely difficult to pass a bill of this magnitude in an election year. But I'm banking that those 201 legislators are going to put the best interests of Minnesota first and foremost. I think they've heard enough from their constituents all over the state. I certainly have, who's saying get it done this session. We don't want to wait another year to see if we can move Minnesota forward. And I'm still hopeful that they will face up to that responsibility.
Any meetings scheduled with the other leaders today, or do you anticipate any?
I'm available. I haven't. We don't have anything scheduled at this point, but they tend to get scheduled on short notice, so I don't rule that out. But yeah.
In addition to wanting to kill the Southwest Light Rail, a lot of the Republican lawmakers tell us that they don't like transit because the operational expenses aren't self-sustaining. Any response to that line of talk?
Well, I think most public transportation systems need some sort of public subsidy. I think that's been the case I can't say definitively, but as far as I know, as long as Metropolitan Council has been operating public transportation. But if we didn't have public transportation and put everybody onto the highways, we'd have worse congestion in the metro area than we do now. So people who are paying for public transit that they don't use themselves derive a benefit from that, because the more people that are on those buses and trains, the fewer people have their cars on the highway to add to the congestion. If we're going to have a viable metropolitan area over the next 25 years, we have to have a public transit system. We're behind most other advanced metropolitan areas in the insufficiency of our system and the lack of the connections that are necessary to really have it be a complete and comprehensive system. But we are where we are, and if we're not allowed to make progress in that regard, and we're just going to operate buses that are more and more antiquated and inadequate relative to the need, or if they compress the growing desire for public transit and push everybody onto the highways, the highway congestion we're already experiencing is going to get that much worse.
On the theme of divided government, do you have a different strategy going into this session? I mean, last year you held frequent news conferences there at the end saying you would veto the education budget bill. You frequently criticized Republicans then, more vocally. Do you have a different strategy this year?
Well, I want to get things done. I mean, the people of Minnesota are the arbiters of what kind of government we have, and they voted for divided legislative control. So it's my responsibility and their responsibility as well to make that work.
I've done that with a different strategy, though.
What's the difference?
Well, it sounds like at this point you're reaching out to legislators more, having them over at the residence to talk more frequently, and I'm curious if there's a bit of a charm offensive there.
Well, that was a criticism after the last session. I took that to heart. I mean, I think that was a valid one of the reasons. I thought if I exposed more legislators directly to my winsome personality, it would make things just go that much better this session. Now, in the next 82 hours, we'll determine. But yeah, I have reached out more, and we'll intend to continue to do so, and I hope it's proving to have a beneficial effect.
Governor, the bonding bill failed in the House, I understand. 69 to 64 was the vote. Your thoughts on how to proceed from here?
I'd have to look at it to see. I mean, I think my understanding was most of the Democrats were not going to support it because they thought it was inadequate, and because the individual projects were heavily skewed toward Republicans and Republican districts. So,
is it time for you and the other leaders to step in and negotiate that bill yourself?
I think the Conference Committee, once, if it gets, assuming it gets to Conference Committee, and again, I'm told there are vehicles to take it to the Conference Committee, both the House and Senate. Once it gets to Conference Committee, I think that's the place to work out the differences, and I and my staff will certainly be closely involved in that process. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.